Alright, so I got a 350 here that I'm gonna try to find some video to put with this video, but if I couldn't find the video, because I did it a long time ago, I had the motor about ready to put together. I was waiting on parts, plus a friend of mine wanted to come down, and he'd never built a motor, and so I was gonna let him work on this with me, but we never could get together, and I finally got caught up to a point where I can work on this thing. But anyway, I got this motor, oh man, 15 or 18 years ago. I think it's an 87 model motor. It's a one-piece remain sealed block. And a guy had put it in a mid-70s K5 Blazer and couldn't get it hooked up or whatever. And I ended up getting it from him. When I got it, I pulled the pan, looked at it, looked really good. I cleaned it up real good. I put brass freeze plugs in it. I always put brass freeze plugs in my motors because they won't rust out. Freeze plugs rust out from the inside, so you got to watch it. They'll rust out on you. They'll look good, but they won't be. But anyhow, if you look carefully, you can see the stamp marks in the freeze plugs, but they're brass, but they got painted over. I usually don't paint them, but I re-cleaned this motor and painted it. It had been sitting up under a workbench for 15 years. I had pulled the flat tappet cam out and retrofitted a roller cam. This was a roller ready block, and as you can tell by the retainer plate, and when I turn it over you'll see the lifter retainer plate on the other side. But anyhow, so I've put a roller cam in here, and it's got the fuel pump lobe on it, which is important because it's going in a truck that's going to have a carburetor on it, so it needs a fuel pump lobe so I don't have to run electric fuel pump. And so I've put the bearings in, and if you pay attention, the grooved bearings are the bearings that go in the block. The bearings without the grooves go in the main caps, and the caps always go in the same place they came off of. That's why they're in the box in order with the new bearings in them already, so they're ready to go in the motor. So I polished up the crank and cleaned it and everything, but it's been sitting up, so I'm going to go blow my crank out, and then I'm going to put some lube on the bearings, and we'll put the crank in the motor. So I've got all the bearings lubed up. I just got through blowing my crank off, which you can hear my compressor running in the background. But like I said, this motor had been under the bench in my garage for 15 years or so since I changed the cam out in it. I never did put it in whatever, I don't even remember what I had planned to put it in. But so with it sitting under the bench so long in my garage, I got it out, and it looked real clean. I mean, it looked like about like it did when I put it up, but I started thinking about it, and I was like, man, you put that motor in there, one, you didn't know nothing about it to start with, and it's been so long since you did anything to it. Let's go ahead and tear it down and go through it just to make sure. And I'm kind of glad I did, because two pistons had stuck rings on them, and they might have freed up after running a while, but it probably would have been an oil consumption problem initially and could have been a long-term problem. So it was just easy and cheap as rings, bearings, and a gasket set, or I thought a peace of mind is worth a lot, so that's what I've done. And so now we're getting ready to lay the crank in this thing. Alright, so we got the crank laid in here. We're going to take our main caps and lube them up and stick them on. Alright, so we got all the main caps on. I like to use this kind of thing to tighten them down with. That way you don't torque them till you torque them. And then I'll go torque at 65 and then finish them up at 75 each. So I'll start at the rear and spin the crank as you go to make sure nothing's too tight. Alright, so the easiest way I've found to ring my pistons is just to set them on the vise. It's not tightened down, it's just using the vise as a cradle. So you'll do that, put the expander on, and then the the center expander, and then the rings themselves top first, and then the bottom first, and then the top next. Then pair of ring pliers. Just like that. And you always want to make sure the dot is up. There'll be an instruction packet in your rings that'll show you, if it doesn't have a dot on it, what the orientation of the ring is supposed to be. But make sure you put them on the right way. You don't want to put them on upside down. Just like that. And then you want to stagger your gaps. There's a gap, there's a gap, there's a gap, there's a gap, and there's a gap. So the gaps are all staggered. And I know I've showed this trick before, but I like to take an old piston box and just organize all your parts in it. Now I'm going to go through and pull the caps off. Wipe the rod inner surface, the bearing surfaces out, and put the bearings in. I always like to check every bearing shell to make sure it's the right size. These are standards. The tabs right here go in the tab slots in the rods. Same with the main caps. And then we'll go with all those like that. Alright, now we've got everything put together and ready to put in the engine in this nice neat box here. Got the engine right here. And we'll lube the cylinders, lube the crank up, and start putting pistons in. So, alright, whenever you get ready to put your the cylinders that you're going to put in, you want the crank all the way at the bottom of the stroke. So we're getting ready to put 1 and 2 in, so that's where the crank is. And we'll turn the block over so we can have access to the bore. The cover or piece of 3/8 fuel line to cover the threads up on the rod bolts so you don't scratch the crank. Just cheap insurance. It don't take but a minute, and that way you're guaranteed that you're not going to have a uh-oh moment. We got our first 2 bearings all lubed up. Get it all coated good. Stick it right there and put my ring compressor on it. Alright, so we got the ring compressor on there. And then we'll just take a hammer handle and gently tap the piston in. Come down here and make sure you're guiding it in over the rod wheel well. Now, as you can see, we have the two pistons in. Then we'll flip the motor over and put the rod caps on. Alright, so here we got it upside down, showing you that we've safely managed to get it in there without scratching the crank up. And there we go. And then we put the rod caps on, making sure that the tangs match together. Just like that. Then we'll put the rod nuts on and torque them to 45 foot-pounds. Alright, so we got those torqued in. We got the 3/4 journal pointing straight down. And turn the motor over and do this 6 more times. So that's pretty much all there is to putting the short block together. And so I'm gonna finish buttoning this up, and then we'll show you more as we go.